In a world where most people are more worried about being believed than being caught, Blueface picked the wrong week, the wrong city, and the wrong girl to slip up with, because what has just crawled out of the internet's basement is not a rumor, is not a whisper, and is absolutely not a coincidence. And by the time you finish this video, you're going to understand why the Blueface and CHRISEAN story just detonated in a way that even their loudest defenders cannot patch back together. Away from the cameras, away from the carefully staged maternity shoots, away from the syrupy captions Blueface has been posting under Nevaeh's baby bump photos. A very different Blueface has been walking around Miami with his arm hanging over CHRISEAN Rock's head like the last 3 years of drama, denial, and public promises never happened. And you already know who caught him. Not the paparazzi. Not the blogs. His own fans. CHRISEAN's own fans. That is why this one is different. That is why this one is not going away. Sit with the receipts for a second, because the internet does not miss when it decides to work. What we are looking at is a set of photographs and clips that surfaced out of CHRISEAN's own brother Petey's Instagram page, and inside those frames is a tattooed arm, a specific luxury watch, and a hand positioned so casually over CHRISEAN's head that only one person on planet Earth wears that combination in that exact way, and that person just happens to be the same man who, 1 week ago, was standing shoulder to shoulder with a very pregnant Nevaeh in a maternity photo shoot wearing the identical timepiece. Same watch, same wrist, same tattoos. Different woman, different city, different lie. That is the story. That is the receipt. And that is why Blueface cover is fully blown. Blueface is not just a name being dragged through the mud tonight. Blueface is the epicenter of one of the most reckless celebrity cover-ups the internet has decoded in months, and CHRISEAN Rock, whether she wants to admit it or not, is standing in the blast radius. Nevaeh, who is 35 weeks pregnant with Blueface's child, is at home, and while she is at home, Blueface has been photographed behind the camera, in front of the camera, and directly above the camera in a Miami room where CHRISEAN was very publicly having the time of her life on someone's lap. That someone is not Petey. That someone is not Pootie. That someone, based on watch, wrist, tattoos, gray shirt, height, posture, and the exact still frame video evidence pulled by fans on TikTok, is Blueface. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Let me walk you through what actually surfaced, because a hit piece is not a hit piece if the evidence is stacked this deep. The first artifact is a photograph pulled directly from Petey's Instagram. CHRISEAN is seated. Above her, hanging loose and possessive, is a tattooed forearm. On that forearm sits a very distinct watch. Fans dropped that watch side by side with the one Blueface wore for his maternity photo session with Nevaeh, and the resemblance is not vague. It is not squint and see. It is 1-to-1. That is receipt number 1. Then came receipt number 2, and receipt number 2 is the one that turned the fan base against itself, because a bystander at the venue posted a full motion clip on TikTok showing the entire room, and inside that clip Blueface is unmistakably present, wearing a gray t-shirt, standing close enough to CHRISEAN that no reasonable person can call it a coincidence. Some fans tried, briefly, to say the man in the gray shirt was Pootie. That was scrubbed out inside minutes, because Pootie is also in the video and Pootie is wearing a white tank. 2 different men. 2 different shirts. 1 clear Blueface. That is when the panic set in. That is when CHRISEAN's own fanbase went into full civil war, because for years these supporters have run interference for CHRISEAN, absorbed every embarrassment, and translated every disaster into a redemption arc. But this one broke them. This one snapped the loyalty spine. For the first time in the entire history of this saga, CHRISEAN's fans and Blueface's mother Karlissa Saffold are on the same side of the argument, and that alliance alone should tell you the ground has shifted. Karlissa jumped on her platform and posted the words nobody expected to hear out of her mouth, telling her followers to stop sending her the pictures, calling the man in the frame a hired lookalike, insisting she knows where her son is, and pushing back on the whole story with the kind of denial that only surfaces when a mother knows her son is caught. Around her, CHRISEAN supporters echoed the same denial, some of them insisting the man on the couch was actually CHRISEAN's brother, others swearing the entire clip was AI generated, others quietly logging off the app rather than defend what their eyes were telling them. Peel back the surface on why the brother excuse could not survive contact with reality. CHRISEAN has, on multiple occasions and on multiple platforms, called her brother a demon, called him evil, called him a rainbow, called him a transformer, and used language for him that no sister uses for a sibling she casually grinds on in a Miami living room. And yet, when the receipts hit the timeline, the narrative from the loyalist side flipped inside 24 hours. Suddenly Petey was the man on the couch. Suddenly Petey and CHRISEAN were just goofing around. Suddenly the same brother she has publicly compared to a mythological villain became her comfort blanket in a nightclub setting. That does not add up. That does not pass the sniff test. And the reason it does not add up is because Petey is visible elsewhere in the same footage, sitting in the back, wearing a white hat, with a completely different posture and a completely different position in the room. Petey is accounted for. Blueface is the man on that couch. The maternity picture is the piece that will haunt Blueface for the rest of the pregnancy. Here is what fans did, and here is why it worked. Somebody with too much time and exactly the right amount of forensic patience took the maternity shoot photograph in which Blueface poses beside Nevaeh, cropped in on his wrist, isolated the watch face, isolated the strap, isolated the exact orientation of the hand, and dropped it beside a screen-grabbed still from CHRISEAN's Miami footage. The two images match. The two images do not need commentary. The two images end the debate. Blueface can call it AI. Blueface can call it a lookalike. Blueface can call it whatever he wants. The internet already has the side-by-side, and the internet does not care. Then the situation got worse for Blueface, because his mother Karlissa did what Karlissa does. She tried to build an alibi, and she picked the wrong person to build it with. Jaidyn Alexis, mother of Blueface's other children, hopped on her Instagram stories with a message so cold it could freeze a Miami rooftop pool. Jaidyn Alexis said she is not anybody's alibi. Jaidyn Alexis said she is not going to sit inside a lie that other people are telling. Jaidyn Alexis put the receipts out too, because Karlissa had been telling anyone who asked that Blueface was safe at home with Jaidyn, that Blueface was not in Miami, that Blueface was not with CHRISEAN, and that anyone claiming otherwise was spreading false news. Jaidyn Alexis publicly refused to play that role, and the way she refused, publicly, on story, in front of every follower she has, was a devastating cosign of the very rumor Karlissa was trying to bury. That is what a mother does when she has been caught covering. That is what a co-parent does when she has decided the drama is not worth her name. You have to appreciate the geometry of this collapse because it is beautiful in the way that only a completely self-inflicted celebrity crisis can be beautiful. Blueface goes to Miami. Blueface leaves a heavily pregnant girlfriend at home. Blueface makes sure not to appear on camera by taking the camera himself for part of the night. Blueface then gets exposed by the very hand that hangs into a frame he thought he had controlled. Blueface's mother tries to sell an alibi. Blueface co-parent burns the alibi. CHRISEAN's own fans start openly agreeing with Blueface's mother. And in the middle of all of it, Nevaeh sits at home, 35 weeks pregnant, watching the same internet everyone else is watching, digesting the same receipts everyone else is digesting, and connecting the same dots the rest of us are connecting. Sit with that for a second. 35 weeks pregnant. That is the detail that turns this from a celebrity gossip cycle into something a lot heavier. 35 weeks pregnant. A woman that far along could go into labor any day. A woman that far along should not be finding out in the comments of a TikTok that her partner has been photographed with his hand on his ex. A woman that far along deserves better than a boyfriend hiding behind a camera in a city he did not tell her he was in. That is the moral center of this whole story, and it is the part that no fan base, no matter which side you fall on, gets to handwave away. Line these pieces up next to each other, and it stops looking like a rumor and starts looking like a pattern. Blueface has a history. Blueface has a track record. Blueface has publicly gotten Nevaeh pregnant, publicly posted the maternity shoots, publicly promised he was a changed man, publicly went on stream and shared their positive pregnancy tests with the world, publicly celebrated the coming baby boy, and then privately booked himself into Miami with the woman he has spent years being unable to leave alone. That is not a rumor. That is a receipt-supported chronology, and the chronology says Blueface is not new to this. Blueface is true to this. CHRISEAN is not new to this either. CHRISEAN is the co-writer of this exact story, told in different fonts, on repeat, for the entire length of their public relationship. CHRISEAN, on her platform, has publicly denied ever being with Blueface again. CHRISEAN, in her own words, has called Blueface every ugly name a woman can call a man. CHRISEAN has told her fans she is done with him. CHRISEAN has told her fans she is focused on boxing, on her son, on her career. And CHRISEAN has, apparently, been telling her fans one story while living another one entirely. That is why the fanbase feels betrayed, and the betrayal is worth naming because it is where all the anger is coming from. CHRISEAN's supporters, over the last 6 years of the saga, have absorbed every insult on CHRISEAN's behalf. They have argued with Karlissa. They have argued with Nevaeh. They have argued with Blueface. They have argued with the world. They have shown up in comment sections and defended CHRISEAN when defending CHRISEAN cost them credibility. And in return, CHRISEAN has been photographed on Blueface's lap in Miami, apparently mid-laugh, apparently mid-something else, apparently mid-everything the fanbase told the world was not happening anymore. That is a hard pill. That is a mislead. That is a deception, and the fanbase is saying it out loud, in the comments of every video covering the story, in the replies to Karlissa's posts, and in the direct message threads that are somehow always finding their way back to a screenshot. Look at what people are actually writing, because the temperature of the fanbase tells you more than any headline. One longtime CHRISEAN supporter posted a plea asking people to pray for her happiness, even if that happiness means being with Blueface, and asking the community to pray for the darkness in and around Blueface to disappear, for God to allow him to stop caring about what the world thinks of him, to apologize to his son, and to finally do right by CHRISEAN. That is a supporter still trying, still hoping, still spinning silk out of concrete. Another supporter shot straight back and said the constant public bashing is why Blueface is too prideful to change, and told the community to be an example for him, to approach him with kindness instead of contempt. And then the pushback started, because a third supporter wrote what a lot of people were thinking, that Blueface is not loving CHRISEAN or her son back, that praying for a reunion is praying for a rerun, and that the Real prayer belongs to the innocent baby who is being humiliated on the internet because of a disability that is not his fault and a father figure who is not showing up. That is the fault line splitting the fanbase. Then came the harder comments. Someone wrote that Blueface is in the way of CHRISEAN's motherhood. Someone else wrote that no one wants to support hate on an innocent baby. Someone else wrote that praying for CHRISEAN to be with the very thing keeping her from being who she needs to be for her child is not prayer, it is enabling. Another wrote that she is deceived. She has misled her fans, and now the fans are doing the cleanup work. That last line, that specific phrase about fans doing the cleanup work, is exactly what has happened. The fans have been sent out on tour to clean up a mess that CHRISEAN and Blueface made together, and the fans are finally waking up and asking why they have been carrying weight that the two principals refused to name. And then a self-described true supporter of 6 years said what a lot of us are thinking. She said she wants CHRISEAN to find happiness, and she does not want that happiness to be with Blueface. She said she will continue to bash him for the way he treats his son, because it is not bashing when it is documented, it is holding him accountable, and she will not respect a man who publicly disrespects a disabled child. She said CHRISEAN is grown, CHRISEAN can pick her life, but the disrespect Blueface aims at that baby is disgusting and unforgivable. That is not a hater. That is a supporter who finally had the courage to draw a line. That is a fanbase learning the difference between love and loyalty. Away from the cameras, another comment cut through in a way most of them do not. One user commented on CHRISEAN's post about the Miami footage and said, plainly, that Blueface only met back up with CHRISEAN to give her a chain, that he has already said publicly he still loves her, that he is still sleeping with her, and told everyone reading to stop being blind. That is a stranger on the internet, so take the sourcing for what it is worth, but the shape of that comment matches every visible receipt in this saga. Blueface has never emotionally left CHRISEAN. CHRISEAN has never emotionally left Blueface. Nevaeh walked into a house that already had 2 people living in it, and now Nevaeh is 35 weeks pregnant inside that same house, watching everyone she trusted circle their wagons around a story that keeps refusing to stay dead. So put it all together, and you get a very ugly, very familiar picture. Blueface says one thing publicly and does another privately. CHRISEAN says one thing publicly and does another privately. Karlissa says one thing on stream and messages another thing to the group chats. Jaidyn Alexis refuses to be the alibi. Nevaeh sits at home with a due date closing in. And the fanbase is finally, publicly, at open war with itself over which reality to keep believing. That is the state of play. That is where we are tonight. That is why the internet cannot let this one go, and that is why every angle of this footage will keep getting dissected until Blueface or CHRISEAN is forced to actually say something that survives contact with the receipts. Peel back the surface on the timeline again, because the timeline is the part that keeps sharpening the knife. Blueface and Nevaeh announced their pregnancy publicly with joy, on stream, with positive tests held to the camera. Blueface and Nevaeh confirmed the baby is a boy. Blueface and Nevaeh did the maternity shoot in matching outfits with the watch that has now betrayed them. Blueface then admitted, live on a stream, that he had cheated on Nevaeh with CHRISEAN. Nevaeh sat next to him at that moment and did not appear to be upset. An image that broke the internet a second time and drew a very particular kind of concern from women who have watched too many other women sit still and smile through a public betrayal because there was no other option available in the moment. Blueface, having admitted the cheating, apparently chose to continue the cheating rather than end it, which brings us to Miami, which brings us to this weekend, which brings us to the watch, which brings us to the hand, which brings us to the moment you are witnessing right now. You cannot script this. Blueface has scripted this. Blueface has been the writer, the director, the producer, and the cinematographer of his own downfall for years now, and the plot twists are no longer plot twists because the audience already knows the ending. Blueface is not going to marry Nevaeh. Blueface is not going to leave CHRISEAN alone. Blueface is not going to publicly claim little CHRISEAN, the son he shares with CHRISEAN ROCK, the child who deserves a father, the child whose disability has been weaponized against him online by people who claim to be adults. Blueface is not going to change. That is the record, plain and clear. And every time the internet dares to hope that this cycle is finally over, Blueface finds a new watch, a new city, and a new couch to sit on to remind the world that the cycle is the plot. Now the real question, the one nobody in the fanbase wants to sit with, is what happens to Nevaeh. Because Nevaeh is not a bystander anymore. Nevaeh is 35 weeks pregnant. Nevaeh is going to labor soon. Nevaeh has watched the same footage everyone else has watched. Nevaeh has read the same comments everyone else has read. Nevaeh had one person on the outside of the Blueface machine she could talk to, and that person was Karlissa, and Nevaeh and Karlissa are no longer talking. That is not a small detail. That is a woman going into labor without a support system on the family side, without a reliable partner, and with the entire internet dissecting the man who is supposed to be her partner. Blueface and CHRISEAN, if they think they can keep the game going without a consequence, need to think again, because Nevaeh has watched too much and heard too much and been silenced too long. And pregnant women in the 9th month of the 9th inning do not stay quiet forever. That is the storm on the horizon. That is the plot twist Blueface still cannot see coming. There is a version of the story where CHRISEAN gets to be sympathetic. That version requires her to say the words she has never said. That version requires her to look at her fanbase, tell them the truth, stop calling Blueface names on Monday and sitting on his lap on Friday, and either commit to him publicly or commit to a life without him publicly. That is not a hard choice, but it is a costly one, and CHRISEAN has always preferred the option that lets her keep both doors open. That is why the comments section is turning on her. That is why supporters of 6 years are logging off. CHRISEAN fans do not want her to be shamed. CHRISEAN fans want her to be free, and freedom is not what she has when she is orbiting the same man who has publicly disrespected her, disrespected her son, disrespected his other family, and now disrespected the internet's ability to count to 2. Free her from Blueface. That is what the loyal side is finally saying out loud. And there is a version of this story where Blueface gets to be redeemed. That version requires him to do things he has so far refused to do. Apologize to his son on camera. Claim little CHRISEAN by name, in public, without the smirk. Stop performing masculinity as a defense mechanism against accountability. Stop the streams that punch down on people who cannot punch back. Show up for Nevaeh in the way a man shows up for a woman about to bring his child into the world. He has not done any of that. That is the record, plain and clear. And so the redemption arc, if it comes, will not come in this news cycle, because this news cycle is not a redemption arc. This news cycle is another indictment. Line these pieces up next to each other one more time, and you can see, in plain daylight, exactly what happened. Blueface flew to Miami. Blueface stayed strategically behind the camera when he could and let his tattooed forearm slip into the frame when he could not. Blueface allowed the maternity shoot watch to appear on his wrist because he could not or would not take it off. Blueface let CHRISEAN sit on his lap in a public setting. Blueface let CHRISEAN's brother post the footage without editing it. Blueface then went home and let his mother tell the internet he was somewhere he was not. Blueface let his co-parent get dragged into the lie. Blueface let his pregnant girlfriend sit at home while all of this played out on every timeline on the platform. That is a decision tree. That is a series of choices. That is not an accident. Zeroed in on the details, this is what forensic gossip journalism looks like when the internet is doing its best work. The watch. The hand. The tattoos. The gray shirt. The white tank. The couch. The angle. The brother in the white hat. The bystander with a camera in the corner. Every one of those items is a data point. Every one of those data points has been triangulated against a maternity photo, a live stream, a TikTok, an Instagram story, and a group of comment sections. When gossip is this well-sourced, it stops being gossip. It becomes reporting. And the reporting says Blueface is with CHRISEAN again, tonight, again, and the reporting is not something Blueface can talk his way out of. There is one more layer to this, and it is the layer nobody wants to sit with because it is the darkest one. Little CHRISEAN, the son Blueface shares with CHRISEAN ROCK, is the innocent standing at the center of the storm, and his name keeps being used as a shield or a sword by every side of this argument. His disability is being turned into a talking point. His father's disrespect is being turned into content. His mother's silence is being turned into a controversy. That baby did not choose any of this. That baby did not audition for a saga. That baby did not sign up to be the emotional currency in a Miami argument between two adults who cannot decide whether they are together or apart. Every time the fanbase wants to talk about the watch, remember there is a child inside the story who deserves better than the watch. Every time the fanbase wants to talk about the couch, remember there is a child inside the story who deserves better than the couch. That is the accountability layer. That is the line that no receipt gets to erase. That is why Karlissa's alliance with the CHRISEAN fans, weird as it is, actually makes a kind of moral sense in isolation. Karlissa may be denying the receipts for her own reasons. Karlissa may be protecting her son for her own reasons. But when Karlissa says stop sending her the pictures, some of what she is protecting is a family name that a grandchild is going to have to carry. And when CHRISEAN supporters say the same thing, some of what they are protecting is a mother whose life is bigger than a viral clip. There is no clean side here. There are just people who have watched a story go on too long and are trying, badly, to shove the toothpaste back into the tube. It is not working. Meanwhile, Blueface is still online. Blueface is still performing. Blueface is still doing the routines that made him famous and are now making him infamous. Blueface still has not addressed the Miami footage in a way that engages with the actual receipts. Blueface still has not apologized to Nevaeh in a way that a 35-week pregnant woman could reasonably accept. Blueface still has not confirmed or denied that the man on the couch is him, and the silence is louder than a denial would be. Silence, in a story like this, is a confession with better lawyers. CHRISEAN is on her own tightrope. CHRISEAN has made public denials that have been contradicted by public footage. CHRISEAN has burned her own credibility with the fan base that carried her the longest. CHRISEAN now has to decide whether to double down on the denial, which the receipts have made impossible, or come clean, which her pride has made unlikely. There is no third door in that room. That is the trap she built for herself, and the internet is sitting on the other side of the door with 100,000 cameras. And Nevaeh, the woman we keep coming back to, sits in a house that is no longer a home, carrying a baby who did not consent to any of this, waiting for a partner who is not coming, watching an internet that will not stop, holding on to a bond with a mother-in-law that no longer exists, and trying to hold together an image of a family that was already fractured before the maternity shoot ever happened. Nevaeh is the person to watch. Nevaeh is the one whose next move nobody has predicted. Nevaeh is the one who could, with a single live stream, one Instagram caption, one Twitter thread, or one silent decision to walk out of that house, rewrite the entire narrative of the saga in a way that Blueface and CHRISEAN cannot control. That is the storm the internet keeps circling but not landing on. Blueface and CHRISEAN are playing a very old game with a very new audience, and they are playing that game while a woman they cannot manage sits at home carrying a baby they cannot ignore. Line those pieces up next to each other, and the picture is not gossip. The picture is a family in freefall. The picture is a fan base in mourning. The picture is a father who is not fathering. The picture is a mother who cannot admit she is a mother in a triangle she said she left. That is the story. That is the moment. That is where we are. Peel back the surface on the deeper pattern and you find something that keeps repeating in this saga. Blueface only ever shows up when the cameras are ready to reward him for showing up. Blueface only ever performs the boyfriend role in maternity shoots that require a boyfriend. Blueface only ever performs the dad role in videos where the dad role gets him applause. Blueface only ever performs the changed man role when a new relationship needs a changed man. And in every single one of those performances, the private Blueface waits in the wings until the audience turns away, and then the private Blueface walks straight back to CHRISEAN, because the private Blueface has never actually left. That is not a rumor. That is the pattern the receipts keep drawing on the wall. CHRISEAN, meanwhile, has built her public identity on being the woman who left. CHRISEAN has told the world she left. CHRISEAN has performed leaving. CHRISEAN has monetized leaving. CHRISEAN has trained her audience to cheer for leaving. And every time CHRISEAN climbs back into that Miami room, she erases her own headline. That is why the fanbase feels stupid tonight, because the fanbase has been out here defending a headline that the headline's author keeps rewriting. The most damning thing about this whole cycle is how normal it feels. Nobody is surprised. Nobody is shocked. Nobody is stopping to gasp. This is Blueface and CHRISEAN's 14th version of the same episode, and the audience already knows the plot beats. The only reason this one hits differently is because Nevaeh is 35 weeks pregnant, and because a set of receipts finally arrived that even the loyal side cannot deflect. That is what tips this one over the edge. That is why the fanbase is fracturing in real time. That is why Karlissa and CHRISEAN fans are, unbelievably, standing on the same rug. If you have watched this story from the beginning, you have seen every trick in the playbook. The stream apology. The Instagram live meltdown. The strategic silence. The friend of a friend leak. The paparazzi ambush that just so happens to catch CHRISEAN looking exactly the way she wants to be caught looking. The photo of the sun that comes out just in time to soften a bad news cycle. The random philanthropy clip that comes out just in time to reset the algorithm. Every one of those moves has been deployed at some point in this saga, and every one of those moves is on the shelf, ready to be deployed again in the next 48 hours. Watch for it. It is coming. The playbook does not vary. The playbook only recycles. That is the record, plain and clear. Blueface and CHRISEAN are locked in an orbit that neither of them wants to break out of. Nevaeh is standing inside the gravitational field of that orbit whether she consented to it or not. The child she is carrying will be born into that same field. The child CHRISEAN already has is being raised inside that field. That is not a love story. That is not a redemption arc. That is not a will they won't they. That is a cycle with victims, and it is time the internet stopped pretending otherwise. So put it all together, and here is the final tally. Blueface got caught. Blueface watch got caught. Blueface hand got caught. Blueface mother got caught trying to build an alibi. Blueface co-parent refused to protect the alibi. CHRISEAN got caught. CHRISEAN's brother's Instagram got caught. CHRISEAN's fanbase got caught agreeing with a woman they have spent years feuding with. Nevaeh got caught in the crossfire. Little CHRISEAN, again, got caught inside a story he did not ask to be a character in. That is a lot of catching. That is a lot of receipts. That is a lot of things Blueface and CHRISEAN are going to have to talk their way out of, and neither of them is very good at talking their way out of anything without making it worse. Here is what nobody is willing to say out loud yet, so let me say it. Nevaeh is a bomb with a very quiet timer. Nevaeh has not spoken publicly about the Miami footage. Nevaeh has not gone live. Nevaeh has not tweeted. Nevaeh has not filmed a story. Nevaeh is silent, and the silence is not a defense of Blueface. The silence is the moment before a woman decides what to do next. Blueface should be worried. CHRISEAN should be worried. Karlissa, cut off from Nevaeh, should be the most worried. Because the person with the least airtime in this saga has become the person with the most leverage in it, and when Nevaeh does decide to speak, whether she chooses to speak by leaving, by staying, by exposing, or by disappearing, she will decide the ending of this chapter, not Blueface, not CHRISEAN, and not the fanbase. That is why this moment matters more than the other moments. That is why the watch matters more than the other watches. That is why the couch matters more than the other couches. Because for the first time in the entire saga, the loudest voice is not CHRISEAN's, is not Blueface, is not Karlissa's, is not the fanbase's. The loudest voice is Nevaeh's, and she has not even opened her mouth yet. So sit with that. Sit with the fact that this whole story, all the receipts, all the watches, all the tattoos, all the couches, all the brothers, all the alibis, all the fanbase infighting, is being played out under the shadow of a woman 35 weeks pregnant who has said absolutely nothing publicly and could, at any moment, say everything. Sit with the fact that Blueface and CHRISEAN, for all their public volume, are being outmaneuvered by a woman who has chosen not to be loud. Sit with the fact that the internet, for all its detective work, has still not figured out that the person nobody is talking about is the person who will decide how this ends. That is where we leave it tonight. Blueface has been caught. CHRISEAN has been caught. Karlissa has been caught. Jaidyn Alexis is, because when Nevaeh finally decides how she wants this to end, none of us will need forensic detectives, screenshot side-by-sides, or watch comparisons anymore. She will hand us the closing line herself. Tell me what you think in the comments, because I want to know where you stand tonight. Do you believe Blueface is on that couch? Do you believe CHRISEAN is doubling down on a lie? Do you believe Karlissa is protecting her son or protecting herself? Do you believe Jaidyn Alexis just quietly ended the alibi game with a single Instagram story? Do you believe Nevaeh should stay, leave, speak, or wait? Drop your answer. Drop your receipts if you have any. Drop the name of the person you think is going to break silence first, because whoever breaks silence first is going to control what happens next. If you made it this far, tap that like button, hit subscribe if you have not yet, share this with the group chat that has been debating this since the first still frame dropped, and turn on the notification bell because when Nevaeh moves, when Blueface counters, when CHRISEAN responds, when Karlissa live streams, and when Jaidyn Alexis clarifies, you are not going to want to hear it secondhand. You are going to want to hear it here first, in the receipts, in the timeline, in the room where the whole thing keeps unraveling. Blueface and CHRISEAN have played this game before, but they have never played it against Nevaeh at 35 weeks. That is the difference. That is the story. That is the storm. And that is the moment the whole internet is holding its breath for. Love you all. Stay watching. Stay reading. Stay skeptical. Stay kind to the babies inside the story. And I will see you in the very next video, because trust me, the very next video is going to arrive faster than anybody in this saga is ready for. And before you close this tab, sit with one more receipt, because this is the receipt nobody has framed yet. Blueface built a maternity photo shoot with Nevaeh, knowing the same watch on his wrist was about to be photographed on CHRISEAN Rock's furniture. Blueface knew. Blueface chose. Blueface walked into that shoot, smiled for that camera, wrapped his arm